Hey, everybody, welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name's Henry Bingaman. I'm really excited for this podcast today. I have on one of my very good friends who I've known for a long time in the copywriting world, Miss Marcella Allison. Marcella's been involved in the art world. She's been involved in venture capital. And of course, she's one of the best known health and financial copywriters working today. Marcella, thanks for coming on.
I'm excited to be here. Oh my God, we always have so much fun when we talk. Although we'll have to be careful since this is on the public record when we get going.
Yeah, it's not one of those off-record conversations where we can talk crap about everybody. So I wanted to have you on because, as you know well, because I've been calling you a lot for advice recently, I have a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, some unresolved legal issues that have been going on for over a year. And it's one of those things where it's very expensive to deal with it. It's just way more expensive to not deal with it and pretend it's not existing.
Yep. Right.
And as you know, it's been tripping me up on a lot of my work. I don't usually miss deadlines. I don't usually ghost clients or prospects. And it's just been one of those things where, I've never had anxiety in my life. And all of a sudden, for the past year, I just get these waves of anxiety where it's like, it's almost crippling. And, I feel like as the, manly entrepreneur dude, it's just like, dude, you got to muscle up and just get through this.
I do not have anxiety.
Yeah. But sometimes you have to admit, like, no, I need to step away. And, over the course of your career, you've been copywriter for 20 years now, something like that.
Yeah, it's not probably more than that at this point. I'm 57, and I think I started when I was before I was 40. I was writing for Schaefer's because I turned 40 when I was at Schaefer's. So it's probably close to 20 now.
Yeah. And so, your personal life hasn't always been the most calm, tranquil environment. So
Good way to put it.
I thought this would be, but we've both, despite these things, we've both still done very well. It's just
kept going.
There are certain times in our life that we have to deal with personal issues that we can't let destroy our business, right? Because it would be very easy to let these personal things just drag us down and, become alcoholics in the back corner and give up everything that we've earned. And
I always say a bottle of bourbon under the desk, right? Crawl under the desk with a bottle of bourbon.
But so can you kind of give people you don't have to give any details you're not comfortable giving, but can you kind of share what you've been dealing with in a broad sense over the past couple decades?
Yeah. So right as my career was really taking off, I had been working with Paris Lampropoulos and David Deutsch. I'd been training to write these, old school magalogs for big clients like Soundview or Advanced Bionutritionals and Boardroom. I was finally beginning to make enough money to keep the lights on. And our family just spiraled into a crazy roller coaster ride of mental illness and addiction. And it was really hard at certain times. We're in a really great place now. But what I can say is that going through that taught me a lot about how, on the one hand, when you're an entrepreneur, it is a huge blessing to have your own business when these things happen, because I didn't have to ask my boss's permission to go to the psych ward and visit my child, right? I didn't have to ask permission to deal with the emergencies in my life, right? We were in and out of treatment centers, all kinds of stuff going on. So that's the good news, right? When you're an entrepreneur, you're your own boss, you set your own schedule. The bad news is you are also the only one bringing in the money, right? So if you're not at the desk working, then you're not getting paid, then you don't have the money that you need to pay for these services. So it's a real balancing act. So on the one hand, it was a gift. On the other hand, it was a challenge. And I learned a lot going through those challenges, some of the things we started to talk about earlier. So I think the more I've been in this industry and the more I've been in the business, the more I've learned that entrepreneurs themselves have these challenges. They might vary, right? It might not be addiction. It might not be mental illness. But we're all going to face these moments, right? We're going to have a major challenge either in our personal lives, with a family member, with someone we love, with a health scare. Almost everyone I know has had to go through this at some point or another and figure out how to keep going and how to keep their business alive. I mean, the pandemic was huge for all of us, right?
Yeah.
Right? So it's going to happen. And I think just having some skills and some tools and some idea of how to get through that is important. And I will say this, statistically, it turns out that entrepreneurs are far more likely to suffer from anxiety or any different form of mental illness than non-entrepreneurs, almost 3 times. So we're not alone, right? We're not alone. And that comes from research from Resurgo, resurg.co. They did a whole study on mental illness and entrepreneurs. So you're not alone, right? We're not alone going through this, right?
So you're saying that entrepreneurs are by nature crazy.
We're a bit of a squirrely bunch, right? But that's all right. The whole world's a little squirrely now and again.
Yeah. So what do you do? So, it was, I think, a year and a half ago when really my kind of trouble started. And I was in the middle of a project for Money Map, who we were both kind of working. No, actually, you were doing Mentorist at the time. But I was working with Money Map. I was on the middle of a big project, and these things all they seem to come out of nowhere, right? The legal system is not always fair. You just have to deal with it.
No, right. And it has its own deadline.
Right. So this all hit me. I had deadlines coming up, and I had to tell the client, like, look, I am just not efficient right now. Like, I have to, like, the deadline that we set, I'm just not going to be able to make. Like, if you want to bring somebody else in, I understand, but like, just where I'm at, I have these things to deal with. It's just, and it's a very vulnerable moment. It's really hard to talk to a client that you've been working with for years, and you've always been like, you portray, or at least I portray, this image of like, look, I'm the rock solid entrepreneur. I hit my deadlines. I'm reliable. That's why you hire me. And then to go, hey, my life's spiraling downhill. Can we back up a little bit? And it's, what's amazing is, first of all, people share with you like, oh, I understand exactly what you're going through, right? Lawsuits and legal issues are not rare in the entrepreneurial world, and everybody knows the emotional toll it can take on you. Once you've been through it, you'll have empathy for everyone else going through it. But yeah, people were very understanding with me. But I feel like that only goes so far, right? If this keeps going for another year, it's like, well, then you're just not a reliable person anymore. Like I can have sympathy for you, but at the same time, I can't work with you if you're going to be falling apart every 2 months.
Right. I've got to get the work done. So for me, one thing that helped when I realized early on in this crazy journey with mental illness and addiction was that I needed to be able to drop everything at certain moments, and I never knew when those moments were going to happen. No, I could not schedule when I was going to have to drop everything and go deal with an emergency. So I had someone that I had been working with, another freelancer. We had worked together kind of like you and I have on various projects. I had a high level of trust with her. My clients had met her because we were on projects together, right? So they knew her, Lois. So I basically said to her, can you be my backup? Can I copy you literally on every email back and forth from the client so that if I have to vanish at any moment, you can know where the files are? And this is so much easier these days, right? Because there's Google Docs, right? And we can use Google Drive, and you can store everything in the same place. I mean, Bernie has been hugely helpful with me for this when I was running the Mentorist Collective. So I asked her, would you be my backup for this? And she said yes. And the irony is, about a year and a half in, she said, okay, I'm burned out on being your backup. Your trauma has exhausted me. I need something else, But she really helped me and kept it together. So sometimes she would jump in and do some of the writing, right? Let's say there was collateral and she could do the collateral. She's like, okay, I'll get these emails done, right? I'll write the lift notes. I'll do whatever. Sometimes it was just keeping them informed. Hey, Marcella had to leave today. She's going to be out for 2 days. She'll be back on Friday. Can we move this? If not, I can, you know what I mean? So, and in the Mentorist Collective, we had a woman who had to go through breast cancer, not uncommon, something that happens to many entrepreneurs, unfortunately, female entrepreneurs. She also found a partner who wrote in the same niche, who was willing to be her backup. You could also do it as project sharing, right? Ask them to take the lead. And that helped her a lot, right? Because she knew that she was going to be down with chemo or radiation, not feeling like herself, not able to carry it through, but it allowed her to keep her business going. So I think for sure, can you put things in place, especially people, so that your business can keep going? Yes, it might cost you more than if you were doing it yourself, but you don't lose the client and you still get income coming in. So in the end, I think the net is positive, right? To try it.
Yeah. So how do you set expectations with a client going into this? Like you land a client and you say, hey, you just signed this contract with me. Really, thanks for the $20,000 deposit. By the way,
Yeah. So I was I was really lucky. The first time this happened, we had a suicide attempt. My son, he's okay now. He's doing great. But I got a call in the middle of the night. He was at college saying this had happened and I needed to get to Chicago. And I was working with David Deutsch, who's another good friend, as you know. And I was able to call him and say, this is what happened. I can't even pull myself together to communicate to the client. He was the copy chief for the project. He was able to call the client for me, right? And said, here's what's going on. And again, like you said, this was the first time. They were very understanding. When it kept happening, right, it was more of a challenge later. But I will say, having an advocate, for lack of a better word. So David had made a crap ton of money for this client, right? And he was my mentor and he believed in me and he was my copy chief on this. So he could call instead of me having to call, right? He called. And he also said, you know, if for any reason she can't finish it, I can step in if I need to, right? So again, it's like a combination of having a backup or having an advocate to negotiate with the client for me. Other times, smaller clients, there's been times when I just said, look, I've got to cancel the project. I returned the money. I said, I cannot do this. My life is out of control. I will say this, every time when I explained why, I was surprised at the grace that people gave me. And there's a story that I like to tell that's one of the ones that always stayed with me. I had a very challenging, let's say, guru that I was working with, who had been a very successful financial writer, not in the copywriting space, but like think of the Journal of Economics, right? Published articles like that.
One of those hoity-toity economic writers.
You got it. So we keep bumping heads, right? Because I'm writing at a 7th grade level and I'm starting sentences with and but. And so he's changing it all back to like, you know, published paper speak. And I'm saying, you can't do anyway. So we have this like constant thing going on. He's exhausting me. I'm on a phone call with him. It's intense. We're going through something. And I get a phone call from the psych ward where my son was at the time. I knew I had to take it because there's this thing about psych wards, which is you get one chance to answer the phone call and they never try you again, right? So I say to him, I'm sorry, this is a psychiatric hospital. I have to go. And I literally hang up on him just as if I had just gone dark right in the middle of a Zoom call. And so later I called to apologize. I said, look, I'm sorry. I got like 2 rings to catch them and then they're not going to call me again. He asked like, what's going on? And I said, oh, you know, my son suffers from schizoaffective disorder. We talk about this a little bit. He's gracious. He's understanding. We continue the phone call. I don't think about it again, right? We finished the project. 2 months later at 1 a.m. my time, my cell phone goes off and it is this guy. And I'm like, why is he calling me at 1 a.m.? And I answer the phone and it turned out that his godson had a psychotic break. Oof. And was threatening the family. I think he was naked in the front yard. It was like everybody's worst case scenario. And he didn't know what to do. And I was like, okay, here's some numbers that you can call NAMI, call your local psychiatric ward. They'll often have a mobile. Like I talked him through everything I've been through. And he was like, this was the most helpful thing. You were the only person I could think of to call and ask this question. So it's funny how like the thing that I thought would end the client relationship turns out to be this moment. And then after that, I never had any problem. Like that was it. Like then we got along and he just like, so I don't know that you could be that vulnerable with everybody. Right. But like, I was amazed at how much grace people would give me as long as you're working to build a structure that works for you. And like you said, you can't do this every week, right? You have to find tools to help you through it. And the other thing, go ahead.
I think one of the things is, so I've always been, I've never liked the term being vulnerable, right? It's just, I don't like it.
Whoa, it's a little self-helpy. I don't know.
No, it's, you know, you don't show people your weakness. Like we all know we have weaknesses, but you don't want to just say, look, I'm falling apart at this part of my life. But I don't think it's actually showing vulnerability to be able to do some of this stuff. It's actually in some ways showing like strength, because it's like, I have these problems. I'm capable of dealing with them. I have to sacrifice certain things to be able to deal with them. But like, look, I have to handle this. This is my life. I got to handle it. It's not actually showing a vulnerability. It's showing competency in some ways. It's inconvenient to the client, but you're showing that you're competent and well, capable of dealing with these things. So yeah, I don't like showing vulnerability. I'd never tell you my weak spots. I won't tell you the one spot I'm ticklish, right? It's you just don't go into those areas. Not that you're going to tickle me. That got weird. But so I guess another question is, so when I go through these periods of anxiety, like there's certain crutches that I know will actually make things worse, right? Like if
sex, drugs, alcohol, anything, any addictive substance. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not, I mean, it's funny, but it's not a joke. Most people
no,
if I start drinking, because, sometimes it's like, look, I feel stressed. I just going to go buy a bottle of wine and this is going to get better. And then the next day,
I feel it.
Next day it's a bottle and a half. And then the next day it's like, maybe bourbon would be better to fix this. I found like I can't start going down that path because it takes a week out of your life instead of a day.
Yes, it does.
For me, it has to be like, all right, no booze, no weed. I am eating right and exercising this week. And I'm getting my 8 hours of sleep no matter what. No matter if I have to sleep till 10 because I didn't go to sleep till 2. Like I'm getting those 8 hours.
So hard. I mean, for me, it's not getting out of bed, consuming massive amounts of sugar. I always joke that I read trashy romance novels, like anything to escape and not have to think about what's going on in my life. Binge watch Netflix. We all joke about that. And what I've learned is, and this is interesting because I love that book, The Willpower Instinct. It's one of the few that I read over and over again by Kelly McGonigal. And what they found is the more you beat yourself up for those slips, the more likely you are to repeat the behavior the next day. But when she tries to say to people, no, really, you have to say, it's okay that I drank a bottle of bourbon last night, but I'm not going to do it tomorrow. They're like, oh my God, if I did that, I'd drink all week. She's like, no, actually, when you get up in the morning and call yourself a piece of crap and beat yourself up for doing it, that's when you're more likely to drink another bottle of bourbon. So I try to remember, okay, so I didn't get up till noon. I, read a historical romance. I ate a pound of chocolate. But tomorrow's another day. I can start over. It's okay. Getting out of self-blame is one of the best things you can do for me when I'm in that spiral, right? To just say, okay, that was yesterday. Today's another day. I agree with you, like watching those patterns and going, okay, you haven't done anything for 3 days. This is not healthy, right? Go take a walk. I know you want to just sit here and watch 3 more hours of what is my husband binge watching right now? Peaky Blinders. Okay. But instead of that, right, get up and go take a walk. And you are much better at that than me. You're really good at like remembering to like physically exercise and move. Helps.
I am when I am, but sometimes like a couple of weeks ago, I had we were talking about it. It's just, it turned out to be even more expensive, the legal situation, than I thought it was going to be. And, that weekend I binged all 5 seasons of Yellowstone, which by the way, is great.
Oh, that's next on my list.
But like I felt so bad about it because like I have so much work to do right now. I'm launching a couple products. Like I have all these people I need to get back to. I have to get back to the attorneys and, you feel overwhelmed, and I just shut down for a few days and I had to stop and go, look, no, this one of the hardest things for me to do is to learn to sit with the pain for a day so you don't feel it for a week. Like you have to actually lean into it and like say, okay, this is going to hurt. I know this is going to hurt. And I have to do it right now because I don't want this to last for a week or a month. And I mean, it has been incredibly hard for me to learn to just go, all right, I'm going to rip my heart out right now. Then I'm going to go down to the basement and smack the punching bag for 10 straight minutes till I can't feel my arms and then pick myself back up. So what are some routines that you do, I guess, to when because this is a recurring cycles for us right now. So
yes, right.
What kind of routines do you do to get yourself back on track?
So one is, I know I can't do it alone, right? And this is classic 12-step talk, right? So anybody who's in AA or Al-Anon will recognize this, but especially when it came to dealing with addiction and mental illness in my family, I was like, I can't handle this on my own. I got to be able to talk to other people, just like you and I are talking today about anxiety and stress and work. I'm talking to you as an entrepreneur, right? Well, I also needed to talk to parents whose children suffer from mental illness and addiction, or spouses whose spouse, right? Like I had to be able to talk to somebody. So for me, it was going to Al-Anon and going to NAMI is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and they have a family support group too. And the beautiful thing about the pandemic is all these groups went online, right? So like whatever your thing is, right, you can find support, even if you're in a teeny tiny town in the middle of nowhere. So one thing I need to do is have somebody I can talk to. The other thing is I needed my own therapist, right? Like when the anxiety got so far out of control. So this year I went into menopause. I know that you and I joke that I'm old enough to be your mom. When I started in menopause, all of a sudden I had massive anxiety, which it turns out if you've had a lot of anxiety or trauma in your life, it can come back then. And it was really messing up my business, right? I was really having a hard time functioning. And so I was like, all right, get thee to a therapist, right? Go find someone to talk to. I started taking medication again. I'm like, I don't think I can manage this with just supplements and walking and whatever anymore. And when I read that report from Resurgo, however you say it, I realized it's a British company. I realized, okay, I'm not alone, right? A lot of entrepreneurs are going through this. And the more that you can reach out and ask for help, right? Whatever that looks like for you, the better. Like, do not try to go it alone. This is not a situation where you try to bootstrap your way through it. I don't think it works.
No. So I talk about the, my whole 4 cornerstones of liberty, which is security, wealth, awareness, and network. And that network is so freaking key for entrepreneurs. It's having people that you trust, that have your back. That's, in the liberty world, it's, we need certain people that see the world the same way we do, because, I feel like I'm being gaslit by everything that comes on the news. But so in entrepreneurship, you need people, you need to open up to people. And again, I don't think it's being vulnerable. I think it's like, look, here's what I'm dealing with. Here's how I'm dealing with it. So it's not showing, it's not weakness, right? It's like,
but it has to be a person that you trust that can hold that, right? Because like, I don't share the story with everybody, right? Like I share it with people like you or someone I've built a relationship that I have a high level of trust. They're not going to use it against me. They're not going to gossip about it. They're, making sure you have people like that you have a high enough trust level to share those kind of things with, that they can carry it and hold it.
And one of the funny things is, I just stumbled over that 10 times. One of the funny things is how many people in the entrepreneurial world, as you were saying, do share these things. Like I've had friends that, I said, look, I'm going through like a weird spot right now. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember 3 years ago when, I was going through this.
So, your support system it's entrepreneurs. It's, when you talk about the 4 quadrants, it's your physician, it's your entrepreneurs, it's any group that if alcohol is your weakness and AA might help, it could be AA. It could be like your resources for getting through this are whatever you need, right? Just find the things that you need. But I think the bottom line is don't go it alone.
Yeah, I joined another entrepreneurs group that, we have a Zoom call every, once a month, and then just a signal chat going. And it's like so many people have dealt with issues, right? The same issues you're going through, different issues that you can kind of contribute to. It's hard to open up. Like it's really hard to build that level of trust with people initially, to be able to open up to them, because again, you can't, I don't know if it's the testosterone, you can't show weakness as a man.
Well, I think everybody, has their own comfort level with that, but it's smart to be in a community where you get to know people, because then I'm not calling you up out of the blue, right? Like I've seen you in the mastermind. Do you know what I mean? Like whoever you're communicating with, once you've engaged with them in a group, you have a little bit more comfort saying, here's what's going on, And honestly, sometimes I get just as much from hearing other people's stories as sharing my own, right? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, that does apply to me. And I get what she's talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think, just going back personally, you have to learn to look for is the cycles of these things, because they come in waves, right? So you were saying like holidays can sometimes be a trigger for you.
Yeah. I was noticing, so the last week or so, I'm like, I had been really productive all through October leading into November. I took my parents on a 2-week trip and for their 80th birthdays. And then I came back and I'm like, what is wrong with me? I cannot I'm not getting as much done. I'm sleeping in until 9. Tom, my husband's a building contractor. He's out by 6, right? I'm like, turn the light off, right? I'm back in bed until 9:30 or 10. And then I was like, oh, it's the holidays. And in my family, in the past, this year is really great. I'm going to knock on wood, my wooden desk here. But in the past, things tend to go off the rails starting the week before Thanksgiving and all the way through January. So there's just a lot of stuff, right, that I carry with me during the holidays. And I realized, what is that great book? I think it's called The Body Keeps the Score, right? I'm like, even if everything is really good right now, I have anxiety because I'm sort of like, wait, this is when the shoe's going to drop. Like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You know, I still am on hyper alert, right? And so I thought, oh, I'm going to have to just give myself a little grace, practice a little bit more self-care. Maybe don't try to start a huge project between Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? Like recognizing this can be a difficult time for me. I have friends who have lost children actually to addiction, and around the anniversary date, they're like, no, I know that I will not be able to do things right in this 2 to 3, that'll be a really hard 2 to 3 week window. What I think is, and there's a woman in the Mentor Us Collective who brought this up during the pandemic, and I thought it was brilliant. She said, in the middle of the pandemic, she was taking care of her children. Her husband was trying to work from home. She's trying to work from home. This was when we were all in lockdown. So you couldn't even leave. You couldn't order takeout for like, no, you remember how hellacious it was, right? And thank God all my kids were in college or somebody would have died. So she's trying to do all this and she's still planning for an 8-hour day. And she said, what I realized is when I planned for an 8-hour day, and what I really had was about 2.5 hours of productivity between bouncing the kids back and forth and locking herself in the bathroom with her computer to try to get something done. She goes, I would go to bed at night and go, oh my God, right, there's 6 hours of stuff I didn't get done. I'm a failure. But when I realized, you know what, for the next however long this lasts, I have to plan for 2.5 hours of productive time a day and planned accordingly, then I would go to bed going, isn't it amazing what I got done in those 2.5 hours? So if you can change your expectations, don't plan for 8 hours when you're in these moments, because as you and I both said, when you're dealing with major anxiety, just managing that and you don't have 8 hours of on fire productive. I mean, you and I have worked on projects with Money Map where we went for almost 24 hours straight, full on, right? Changing the script, changing the video, being there live. And it's like this huge adrenaline rush and it all comes out and it's amazing. And you're like, oh, this was great. You can't do that when you're dealing with this stuff, right? It's not, so you can't plan that you're going to have a 14-hour video shoot and editing and like, that's not going to work. So I love that when she's like, as soon as I planned for 2.5 hours, then I started feeling like, dang, I'm amazing. Look what I got done in 2.5 hours today, instead of what's the 6 hours of stuff I didn't get done today.
Yeah. So this week and last week, I have been doing, it's just been a mess of just legal conflict.
Hot mess, as my sister from Atlanta would say.
So what I've been doing is saying, all right, I'm going to sit at my computer at 9. I'm going to get to my desk by 9 a.m. and I'm going to work straight through till noon. And that's 3 hours of productivity, right? No matter what I get, whatever else happens to the day, I got 3 hours done. And then I'm going to deal with whatever needs to be dealt with, right? Everybody else can wait till noon and then I'll deal with it. And then I found that, after noon and you send a couple emails and you do a couple calls, you're like, well, I'm not doing anything right now. Why don't I just do another 2 hours of writing or whatever right now? And then you feel extra productive because you only got, 5 hours of work in the day, but you had only booked 3, that these are the essential 3. And, 9 to 12 is my most like creative, productive period anyway.
Yeah, I'm a morning person too.
I'm not a morning person, but for whatever reason it worked. I hate getting up, but I'm the most productive then. That or like, it used to be when I was younger, it was always like midnight to 3 a.m. where I'm most productive.
Oh my God, you and my son. I'm like, do not text me. He's working on this project with me right now for Soundview. I'm like, do not text me at 12 o'clock with your headline idea.
But yeah, it's just that expectation on yourself. It is a big, and letting yourself, honestly, I'm more productive than 3 hours when I say these are my only 3 hours than I would be if I gave myself 6 and said, I have enough time to do this.
Oh my God, it's so true. So a friend of mine from Al-Anon called me on Monday and texted me and she said, hey, I'm going to go walk along the river today for an hour or so in Cincinnati here along the river. Do you want to join me? And my first reaction was, no, I have so much to do, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you need to practice self-care. You need to get out. Walking is going to help with anxiety. You already just realized that you're like feeding into your seasonal anxiety, like get out, right? So I called her back and I'm like, you know what? Yes, I'll meet you at 2. Well, then instead of the writing taking all day, I was like, okay, all these things have to be done by 2. They don't have to be perfect, but they have to be done by 2. And I got them done, right? But I guarantee you, if I had said no to her, it would have taken me until 5 to do them, you know?
Yeah. What's that law where the work fills the time allotted to it?
Exactly. And I think perfectionism gets in the way too, right? Of thinking, and I don't know about you, but when I'm anxious, I get more perfectionistic, meaning like I lose that objectivity. So I will rewrite the same email for 4.5 hours.
I think what it is for me is that when other things, like I'm a control freak in my own life. And so when other things get out of control, I feel like, well, I have control of this, so I have to do it right. That's where the perfection comes in. It's like,
yep.
I can't deal with this. I can't, like, there's literally nothing I can do.
Yep.
So I have to focus on the one thing I can do, and the one thing I can do. And, I know the standards that I'm capable of, but you can't always meet those when you're like freaking out about other things. So it's like a spiral in that way. So what I've learned is the things I can focus on are, nutrition, sleep, and exercise. Those are the 3.
Those are so powerful.
And it's hard, man. It's hard to remember that this is how you have to take care of yourself. But I think you need to learn how to take care of yourself first, right? You can't help anybody else. So you had a big breakthrough a couple years ago where like you kind of just decided to let things go, right? You're like, whatever will be, will be. So how can you kind of talk about your emotional state before and after those kind of breakthroughs you had?
Yeah, I think, well, it's really interesting, right? Because I say the addiction and the mental illness of my family is both a blessing and, right, a trauma or a curse, however you want to say it. But there are gifts that have come from it. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but there are gifts that have come from it. And what I realized early on was the more that I was trying to control the uncontrollable, which in my case was people's drinking and people's mental illness, the more things spiraled out of control. And the anxiety that comes with trying to control something you can't control, it, as you know, like, is incredibly exhausting. And I think all of us carry this fear. I know I did, right? My fear was, but if I'm not trying to control it, if I just step away, the world will end. All hell will break loose, right? Somebody will die. This will be bad. And it took me a long time to really get to the point where I realized I was killing myself trying to control the uncontrollable. I mean, that I was so exhausted and burned out that I didn't even want to get out of bed the next day. And when I hit, it was like I was forced to give up. It wasn't even like I chose to. I was forced to say, I cannot control these things anymore. And what happened then is when I started focusing on only the things that I could control and trying to let go of, planning for every worst case scenario that I could imagine, solutions emerged that were not solutions I would have picked, right? But actually were better than the ones I was trying to force, And I have a whole series of crazy ass stories, but one that I love is I literally woke up one time with an armed drug dealer in my living room. Not something that I had planned on. And at the time, my son was out of his mind, totally out of his mind. And I needed to get him to the hospital. And he wasn't listening to me, right? Turns out the armed drug dealer convinced my son to get in the car with us and helped me get him to the psychiatric hospital. Now, I love to say, as I peeled in, he literally opened the door and jumped out of the moving car as I pulled into the emergency spot. Not my son, the drug dealer, right? And took off. But in my wildest imaginations, the solution was not an armed drug dealer in your living room will be the person who helps you get your son the help that he needs. In no way, shape, or form. Those kinds of things kept happening until I realized, okay, I just have to control the things that I can control. And I have to have some faith, right? That there will be a solution. It might not look like my solution, but there will be a solution. And it came with so much relief that then I could actually function in my own life, right? And I'm not talking about, there's that funny story, not to get religious, but there's that funny story of the the woman during a hurricane, she's on a roof, right? And she's, God save me, right? And somebody comes by in a boat. Here, I'm here. No, God's gonna save me. I don't need the boat, right? Then the helicopter comes. Get in the helicopter, right? The water's rising. No, God's gonna save me. And of course, she finally drowns, and she gets to heaven, and God says, I sent a helicopter, I sent a boat, So I'm not saying that you're just standing there going, something will happen to say. You are taking action, but you're not trying to force solutions or manage the world, right? You're taking care of your part, and you're trusting that everyone else is going to take care of their part. And it taught me to let go a little bit of my death grip on trying to control the world. Because I also like to control my environment and everyone around me and my work and everything that I can, right? And that's not always productive.
It's funny because, I kind of believe, I 100% believe what you're saying is that sometimes God presents, or the universe presents, the solution that you don't even know, you would have never imagined it. And then other times the universe, sends a shark and it eats you, right? It's such a weird, capricious, random.
Right. But, I always think of Einstein. I love that phrase of Einstein's, and I'm not a physicist, right? I took physics for poets. So this is probably going to make every physicist moan.
What is physics for poets?
It was a class, University of Chicago, I'll have you know. It was actually physics for poets. So I remember my physics professor, who actually worked on the Manhattan Project. He was brilliant. And he was explaining, that light is a wave or a particle, depending upon how you measure it, right? The way that you're looking at it. And then he gave us that quote from Einstein, which is, I will paraphrase, right? But it's like either everything, is working for the good, or everything is working for the bad. And you can't pick and choose. You have to just pick. You can't say, oh, that was good, oh, that was bad. It's like an all or nothing proposition. And then he says, and the choice you make, right, determines everything. And I do think that that's a really powerful way to think about it, right? Okay, if I want to believe that everything is working for the good, right? And that it depends upon my perspective. Light will either behave as a wave or a particle. It will either be good or bad based on how I choose to perceive it. And I used to think this was completely woo-woo. And then I read a study. I was working on a health project about stress, ironically. And they were interested in what they called the Eeyore phenomenon. Where everything seems to go bad, like bad luck, schlep rock. All these bad things happen to them. So they were like, is it really true that some people are jinxed and all these bad things happen to them? So they started to examine this, right? And here's what they found out. Those people had changed their perspective to always expect the worst. So when an opportunity would come into their view, whatever, they wouldn't see it. They couldn't even see it as a good thing or an opportunity anymore, because they were so focused on the worst thing will always happen. They had literally turned themselves into an Eeyore, right? So I believe the opposite's true. If you are expecting something, you're actually more aware of an opportunity when it shows up. You're more able to respond and engage in it. And it's hard to do when you're anxious, right? Because it makes you miss them, because you start thinking everything's going to go wrong, right? The roof's going to cave in, the hurricane's going to hit, the whatever,
It is very interesting that, it's one of those, you've seen the red shirt phenomenon. I think I first saw it a Tony Robbins video I was watching when he goes, everybody look around and see how many people are wearing black shirts. Go ahead, count the black shirts. All right, now how many people are wearing red shirts? It's nobody could tell, but then you look around and you see them everywhere. It's, you only can take the opportunities that you can see. And so it's this having a positive faith that things are going to turn out all right is incredibly powerful, in that you'll spot the opportunities in crises. There's always opportunities and dangers everywhere. And it's, you need to be aware of the dangers, but then you need to be more hyper focused on finding the opportunities. It's I don't believe in manifesting per se, the secret type manifesting.
Right. Me either.
But you're never gonna find opportunities you're not looking for. Everything is both good and bad are in front of you, and you're gonna get what you see. Now, it doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen, but you have to find the opportunities in them. And I'm struggling right now to find the opportunities in my current situation.
I know, right?
But at the same time, it's they're there. I don't know where they are, but I'm looking for them.
And I think that's all you have to do. You have to be, in my experience, there's I teach this practice that I teach every year around Thanksgiving on radical gratitude. And most people, when they do a gratitude list, you get up in the morning, I'm grateful I have food. I'm grateful I have a roof over my head. And I'm not discounting, right? That's good. Comes from Melanie Beatty. She makes you put down everything that is making you miserable, but you don't have to feel it. You literally just say, I'm grateful the roof caved in last night. I'm great. Like, you literally go down. And what she says is exactly what you're saying. By just writing the words, I'm grateful for, or I'm grateful that, and putting what you think is the negative thing after it, you don't say what the positive is, because you don't do that. You just say, I'm grateful the roof fell in last night. You open yourself up to the possibility that you will see an opportunity there when it comes, right? Because you've been repeating, I'm grateful this thing is happening to me, right? And I do think that that is the mindset you have to have as an entrepreneur. And it's not just for personal things, right? It's because all of us are going to have failures in our business. I just sold the Mentor Us Collective. I gave up after 7 years and said, I cannot make this sucker fly, right? I sold it to a global mentoring company. But I can already see, right, the things that are coming out of that, right? The opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I had not sold it, right? So as an entrepreneur, your resilience and your ability to be open to the possibility of an opportunity inside a failure is one of the key differentiating factors between entrepreneurs who succeed and those who do not, right?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the big things too that people have to get used to is that it's going to take longer than you expect, right?
Oh my God, yes.
So, we met in 2010, I think, originally. And
at John Carlton's gig out in
no, we met first at AWAI.
Oh, at AWAI, and then at Carlton's.
And then February 2011. I have a picture of us in front of the Hard Rock in San Diego, actually, with David Deutsch. I'll see if I can find that and throw that up. We kept in touch, but we didn't do a single project together for 5 or 6 years after that.
Right.
It was just keeping in touch, and then whatever came would come. And, we've made hundreds of thousands of dollars together since then.
Yeah. You got to play the long game.
Yeah. I think that is a thing that trips people up because, we have an instant gratification culture right now, like the TikTok culture, where it's, if I don't get the reward in 10 seconds, I'm skipping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think as an entrepreneur, especially if you can get through the painful parts of it, that is the hardest thing. Most people give up after a year or 2 years of trying to be a copywriter or trying to be a designer or trying to, go out and do their own thing. And it's, I'm learning this right now with the Practical Liberty business. It's like, oh, I was this hotshot copywriter, so I should be able to slap together a product and throw it up there and make 1 million sales. But, all right. Okay, product development is much easier when you have a full team devoted to building out the product for you.
3 floors of a business, right?
Writing a promo is a lot easier when you have somebody to bounce ideas off of.
Right.
And so it's, it's that forgiving yourself and saying, all right, I miscalculated, I underestimated.
Right.
Let's just recalibrate and move forward and kind of forgive yourself for being wrong. I think self-forgiveness is one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs to do.
It is. And that's why I love that book, The Willpower Instinct. She's like, the single biggest predictor of whether you repeat the behavior or not is whether you forgive yourself for the mistake. Nobody wants to believe that, but it is true, right? And the more you beat yourself up, ironically, the more likely you are to repeat that failure.
Well, and the less likely other people are to forgive you for it in the future. Like if you keep repeating something and you're not forgiving yourself, other people are going to go, oh, all right, well, that person's broken now. And it is horrible because we've all had to let somebody go in our lives. That was, once a friend, once a good collaborator, and then just went on a self-destructive cycle where it's like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to drown with you.
Right. Right. Exactly. Things over which you can't control, which are other people, right?
Yeah.
Other people for sure. I think it's, if you can, I love Elise Bennon with Marketing Mentor, and she has this great line. She says, your business is the vehicle for your personal growth. So if you can think of it that way, right? So what have I learned from this? How has this helped me grow as a person and an entrepreneur, right? And you see your business as the vehicle through which you grow, right? Then it's not a failure. It's like, oh, I grew through that. I'm going to grow through the next thing. I mean, I love that turnaround, right? Your business is the vehicle for your personal growth.
Yeah. I mean, so it's very interesting to me. I hope this doesn't get too personal, but like you kind of, just through our conversations, you've kind of viewed at different times the Mentoress Collective as, it was a win in the early days, then it was a struggle. And then for a while you were looking at it as a failure. And I don't think that was the right way to look at it. We talked a lot about this.
Right.
And, even the way you framed it earlier is like, well, I sold it, but you did sell it, right? You didn't get, it was.
And very few people actually get to the point where they can sell a business, right? To successfully sell a business is huge. I think for me, it was about what you thought the end point would be and what the end point turned out to be, right? So again, it's all about expectations, right? So if I started it hoping it would turn out to be a great source of passive income so that when I retired, I had a way to continue to get passive income to support me, right? Because we don't have a lot of savings because of all of our medical bills over many years. So that was what I had defined as the success. Well, that didn't happen, right? I wasn't able to turn it into a successful recurring passive income stream. But I learned so many things about myself, right? I learned, okay, I want to teach, I want to train, I want to write. I'm not a person who likes growing businesses. It's not my thing, right?
Yeah.
I like doing the thing, right? Teaching, training, lead. I don't like growing a business. Someone like Rachel Mazza, brilliant at growing, like that is her bread and butter. She loves thinking of ways to grow a business. So I'm like, well, this is not a good fit for me, right? This is not a good fit for me. So what I've pivoted to is saying, I hate that word too, but what I've turned is to saying, okay, so what do I love, right? I love teaching, training, coaching, mentoring, and writing. Okay, why don't I do those for other people's businesses? They can use my skills to grow their business and I can get a piece of the action rather than trying to also figure out what my Facebook ad campaign strategy should be, which makes me just want to pound my head into the desk, right? And I think that's important to know. Not everybody has the disposition to be an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur is different than a freelancer. So I'm a really successful freelancer. I was not as successful as an entrepreneur because I don't like growing businesses. And a business can't stay stagnant. As you know, it's either got to grow, decline, right? It can't stay stagnant. Businesses don't exist that stay stagnant.
So how do you reframe expectations because I have a lot of trouble with that, right? It's like, I need to, I had a copywriting freelance career where I was making 7 figures and then I'm not right now, right? Like I dropped the clients and I started this thing. I'm losing money at this point. And it's savings, it's fine. I had this expectation that, within 6 months I'll have a product out and it won't be making me $1 million, but maybe I can get it to 6 figures the first year. And that's not happening at this point, right? It's just, the time frame's taking too long. And so I think it's been a challenge for me to reframe my expectations and say, all right, year 2 in business to get to 6 figures. And then, by year 5, there's no reason I can't have this at a 7-figure business that's stable and much steadier than the freelance hit or miss type. It's
right.
I told you earlier, my income hasn't been within $200,000 of the last year in like 6-7 years. It's crazy. And
I know.
It's hard to budget and it drives the accountants insane. They're like, all right, what are you going to make this year? Okay. We way overpaid your taxes last year. Oh shit. We way underpaid your taxes this year. You're going to owe a lot. Like it makes business planning hard. Whereas in a steady growing business, you have fewer of those things.
I will say, so one of the mistakes I made so it's one thing to reset expectations and change goals, but I also realized it's a slippery slope, right? So I'd be like, okay, if I'm not at cash flow break even by this month, then I'm going to shut it down. And then I would get there and I'd be like, yeah, but this, and this happened. So I'm going to invest another 15 grand and I'm going to go to this month, right? Or yeah, but I'm going to try this thing. Part of it was I had a budget, but I didn't have a business plan. I had a budget for how much I would invest in terms of time and money and my team. I had sort of randomly thrown out lines in the sand like cash flow, but I hadn't actually, which is crazy because I am a former venture capitalist. I had not actually done a full pro forma, like a 3-year pro forma that showed growth, that compared it to comps, that said what is reasonable here, what have other businesses done, so for me, it's okay to change adjustments based on what you're learning, right? Oh, this is going to take longer, but then I have to take that data. So let's just say you're trying to grow your list and the list. So you're like, okay, I need the list to be at that. That means I need to be moving at this pace, which means I might need to invest in these things to move at this pace. I need it to then translate to this much in either affiliate sales or personal sales. But at some point, you have to have what my friend who's in the military calls the mission decision line, right? And I think the earlier you know what your mission decision line is, the better. So I think I would have been better off if I had actually had a full pro forma, not just here's my budget for how much I'll throw at this business to try to make it work, right? If I'd had the full pro forma, mapped out the budget, the whole plan, not just the expenses, and then had a clear and public, at least to my team, mission decision line. If this business is not cash flow break even by this, then this, right? And held myself to it because I was able to talk myself into more money all the time, into investing more money all the time.
Yep.
And it's interesting because when Jen Adams was my partner, she held me accountable and we did reach cash flow break even. It was when she left and I put a lot more money in to try to grow it that I fell down that slippery slope because I didn't have someone who said, look, you said if this didn't do this by this date, you were either going to stop or change your plan and I think the other thing, and it relates to this, is not having an expert like you have Rachel, right, at your side, who has done this before, who's seen the patterns, who can help you be realistic about the goals you're setting, but can also hold you accountable if it's not working, who can say at what, and it's hard to give up on an idea. And I think that I stayed in as long as I did, because in my mind, it would be a failure if I stopped, and I didn't want to admit failure. So I wanted to keep going. Right. But as soon as I sold that, all these other opportunities opened up that were there all the time, but I wouldn't let myself see them, to go back to our earlier point, because I was so focused on, I have to make this thing work. I have to get this thing to, $1 million a year.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes that I did in my business and personal life was when I started working with Brent Charlton. What was that?
Oh, yes.
4 or 5 years ago now. One of the things he had me do was journal regularly and journal about problems. I'm a person that thinks on paper. I have a hard time keeping all my thoughts in my head organized. I have a disorganized brain. So if I write them out and write them out longhand, I'm talking to myself essentially. And so it's almost like having a conversation with yourself, and you all of a sudden becomes concrete, the ideas and the goals. And you're like, well, actually, now that I'm looking at it, you're literally writing, well, all right, that might not be realistic. And it's a way of actually making things concrete. And for me, if I'm resetting expectations, I have to write it out. I have to write out what I did, what went wrong, where the expectation missed, and like, was that even reasonable in the first place to have as an expectation? And then I feel like it helps me recalibrate a lot. That journaling has been, it sounds so, I don't know, lame in some ways, but journaling has been one of the biggest things in organizing my thoughts in my life and my priorities.
I think that's huge. And Michael Hyatt has this great book. Now I can't find it on the shelf. He has a practice too, because I use I'm a big fan of the full focus planner. So Michael Hyatt has this thing when he talks about goal setting, where he said, okay, so most people set the goal. Then if they miss the goal, they look at what happened and they do a, like we call it a post-mortem, right? But the final step of actually changing something based on that information is where most people don't do it.
Right.
So they're like, oh, that didn't work. Here's why. But then they don't actually implement the lesson and change, right? And I think being able to write it down, to examine it, but then to say, therefore, I'm going to change this or try this or do this differently is what makes the difference between just feeling like, well, that didn't work, I'll try something else, but being more scientific about it, which goes back to being an experiment, right? If it was an experiment, you would write down what worked, what didn't work, and what inputs you would do differently next time.
Why do you think that I don't know how to phrase this question. There's kind of a difference between entrepreneurs and people that live their whole life in like the corporate employee system. And entrepreneurs are action takers in general. And it's hard, it's impossible to coast as an entrepreneur. Whereas I think when you're an employee, sometimes you get in these cycles. So I guess I have a lot of people that, they have jobs, they're looking to kind of launch an entrepreneurial type career, and they hear about these problems and they think, well, that sounds like too much. I don't want to do it. What kind of like advice would you give somebody that they have the desire, but they have a fear of even starting?
I always have loved Mark Ford's idea of being an intrapreneur, right? Like, is there a way that you can do an entrepreneurial project within the company that you already work for that gives you a taste of it to see if you really like that, right? And it can take all kinds of forms, right? So I would say that's one thing. Is there an intrapreneurial idea, right, that you could develop within your own company? In terms of external, when you have all those other commitments, I love the idea of baby steps. I mean, there's these people who are like, I had to quit my job. It's all or nothing, man. No safety net. I'm going to make this happen. You talk to these guys, right? Women too, right?
I did that. That was my career, but I was 22 though. I had nothing else to lose.
Right. So it's different. And you did live on ramen noodles, right?
I did.
Most people can't. I'm like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. There's a woman that I interviewed through AWAI and the Mentoress Collective, Noreen. I want to say it's like Kopanacek. I won't say it right. I think it's a Polish last name. Anyway, she was a full-time nurse who wanted to become a freelance travel writer. She did not quit her entire job, no safety net, balls to the wall. I'll find enough clients to replace this income next month. Pardon my French. Instead, she did it one shift at a time. And I loved it, right? She started writing travel articles at night, took a couple free vacations, right? And as soon as she had enough money that replaced one shift as a nurse, she cut back to 4. When she had enough to replace 2, it took her, I want to say, almost 2 years, right? I might get the time frame wrong, but she did it one shift at a time. And I love that idea. And when I did it, unlike you, I didn't go all or nothing. I was a full-time employee. I had an opportunity to work with Paris. I went to my boss and said, I'd really like to take this opportunity to work with Paris. Could I keep doing this job, but cut back and do this thing with Paris as well, right? And I slowly transitioned between working for Schaefer's Investment Research, working for Paris, and then going out on my own. And I just am not an all or nothing proposition kind of girl, because I think it's really, there's so much pressure to make that work and you're under the gun and it's exhausting. So how can you step into it one shift at a time?
Yeah, there's a guy he's on my list, and I've been emailing back and forth with him a little bit. He's in IT. He's got 2 small kids, and he's like, I'm really nervous about the company I'm working with. I this entrepreneur stuff really appeals to me, but like I need health insurance. I need to make sure like I can take care of this. I have a 1 and 4-year-old. Like this is, I can't be unstable. My wife stays home with the kids. Like this is, I have $160,000 salary. Like, what do I do? I told him, just start an LLC, an IT consulting LLC, and find one client. Like, can you find 2 hours in a night to like work on one client's thing? It's like, after the kids go to bed, I have, 9 to 11 if I really need it. I was like, find one client. Just start that. First of all, starting an LLC, you get so many tax benefits. There's really
you can start writing off stuff like your pencils, your paper, all these really fancy journals I love.
Absolutely. But I mean, there's other benefits to having an LLC. You're putting assets in there and protecting them. It's just a good idea if you're at all interested in entrepreneurship. Like you don't want to just be a drone in the corporate machine. Start an LLC and find one consulting client. So I'm actually really curious to see if he does it and what happens with it, because I think just getting that taste and seeing, oh, I can find a client. Oh, I can handle the work. Oh, it's like, actually, this person's paying me way more than my regular IT job just to fix his, patch his security on his website at night or whatever he's going to end up doing. I think that's one of those baby steps that if you're interested, start taking it and then actually learn some of these challenges that we've been talking about, because you're going to feel that anxiety of working with clients. You're going to have that imposter syndrome no matter what you do. So it's better to get through it now, like when it's not your everything.
Yeah. And I think I mean, there's enough anxiety in starting a business to start a business and have the anxiety of, if I don't have enough clients in my first month to make the equivalent of $160,000, my kids don't eat. Nobody can function under that.
No, the pressure. Yeah, you have to.
I mean, you just can't. So I really am not a fan of the all or nothing proposition when it comes to business. And I think also you'll learn, a lot of people think they want to be an entrepreneur. And then when they get into it, they're like, I don't think I like, why not learn that before you like cut all the strings and jump off the cliff?
Yeah. The whole, in my cornerstones net framework, the wealth thing is actually about money. And I think most important thing is being able to have a mobile money skill. And it doesn't matter if you're an employee or not. You just have to be able to work from wherever gives you the most flexibility and freedom in your life. There's a lot of people that, live in Northern Pennsylvania and work in New York City because, you get $170,000 in New York City, which is a nothing salary there. But in rural Pennsylvania, you might have to commute an hour, 40 minutes into work. But at the same time, your taxes are lower, your living expenses are nothing. Right. I mean, having the flexibility, location independence is huge. And I think so mobile money skills, whether or not you go the entrepreneurial route, learn a skill that you can do from anywhere.
I agree, because that's the ultimate definition of freedom, right? It's a transferable and mobile skill that you can take with you, because nobody can take that away from you.
Exactly. It's always invest in yourself, right?
Yep. And that comes back to everything we've talked about health, about anxiety, about your support. If you're an entrepreneur and you are the business, then if a machine was I don't know, this is terrible. Like you ran a printing press and it had, a squeaky wheel or so. I'm not a mechanic here, but something needed to be fixed. You would fix it, right? So if you're suffering from anxiety, good, go get help with your anxiety. If you're right, think of yourself as the most valuable asset that your business has. So of course, dealing with, going to therapy or getting a medication or taking a walk or whatever you need to do, since I sold the collective, I was so burned out that I have literally given myself since June to work less than part-time to recover from burnout, because there's no way I could keep going. I mean, this machine was broken, right? I had to give myself some time. So I love that idea of, invest in yourself, because you are the most important asset this business has.
Yeah. If you're the machine, you have to take care of that machine.
Right?
So, all right, we've been talking for about an hour. I think this has been really good. It's one of those things is everybody's going to deal with this at some point in their life. And you have to learn to manage your own anxiety and stress, because no matter whether you're a job or an entrepreneur or whatever, life comes at you hard and you have to figure out how to deal with yourself. And it's not easy, but again, I honestly find that routine that works for you. Mine's, diet, exercise, and motion and sleeping. Those are the things I need to do to make sure I'm at least functional, and then rebuild from there. You don't have to be, life goes in waves, right? It's not a straight line up, but at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you can stop those downturns and maximize the upswings.
A friend used to say to me, look, it's going to go like this, but as long as the overall slope is positive, you're doing okay, right? Just make sure the overall slope of those up and downs is going from bottom left to top right.
Yeah, you got to be able to back out and look at the overall picture, which is hard to do when you're in the middle of a crisis.
Very hard. You lose all your perspective, which is, again, why having advisors, a partner in the business, another entrepreneur, somebody who can give you that outside in perspective is so critical.
Absolutely. All right. So I think the bonus for this episode that I'm gonna give away is the breakdown that we did of the cannabis power trader. Because
just don't label it cannabis. Because when I tried to give it away and I called it cannabis power trader, I was accused of selling cannabis illegally online and they shut down my Stripe account.
Those punks.
I had to go back. I think I called it jazz cabbage when I had to redo it. I was like, what are we going to call this thing?
But folks watching, if you want to get that, you can go to henrybing.co/breakdown. And it's a whole hour, 3-hour breakdown that Marcella used to sell when she was running the Mentoress Collective for almost $600. So it's a really valuable giveaway. And I've gotten nothing but good feedback on it. And Marcella, where can people go to find more about you?
Good question. So right now, I'm between gigs, but you can go to marcellaallison.com and learn more about me. And I'm working on a new email list that you can join. So come here to learn more about me.
And if are you taking on any projects right now, or are you kind of just rebuilding the list?
I've been doing some training with AWAI, which I'm really enjoying. And David reached out to me the other day, our buddy David Deutsch, to say, hey, I might want you on something. So I'm being very careful after burnout. I'm just baby stepping right now. So maybe first quarter of next year would be the next time I would be open. I'm still defending some controls with Paris. But I'm moving pretty slowly to make sure I'm ready. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah, absolutely. Set expectations right for everybody.
Yep, for me and everybody else.
All right, Marcella, thanks so much for coming on.
This was a ball. Thanks for the conversation.
All right, everybody, that's the episode for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. One quick announcement before I get out of here. My website, which I've been very slowly redesigning, is finally live at henrybingaman.com. You can go there to find all the past episodes of the podcast, and I have a few different options on there for working with me or even hiring me as a coach. So if you're starting out as an entrepreneur or freelancer, that might be a great option for you. So go check that out at henrybingaman.com. And I have a couple really exciting guests booked for the next few weeks. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, and I'll see you next Friday. Until then, stay free.